That's right.
It was program implementation.
Hi, Shania. Hi, Beverly.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
Can we hear you? Can you say something? Since last time we had trouble.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Perfect. So,
The moment of truth, Juliet.
yeah, who's the recorder?
Come on, Juliet, you're phenomenal. Let's be frank and honest here.
Yeah, I mean,
Amazing.
I feel like I'm being
you did such a great job last time.
No, you're not being flattered. It's gonna feel.
Great job
We'll
last
go
time.
ask Adam for the link.
Okay.
Walk of shame.
And, writing project person too, right? Any documentation support? Let's see what we got there.
We are using handout 3B.
3D.
Thank you. And ours starts on page 9.
Okay, thank you, sir.
The directions are on page 1 and 2.
The first thing I'll do is try to do.
Starting, I have a question. So, many moons ago, the program I was a part of had tax, and we hired grad students, among others, to do the scoring. So when we say programs score their own candidates, is that included? Are we, when we're saying program, are we thinking faculty, clinical faculty, people who are hired by the program, like teachers and graduate
I
students?
think we had that discussion and we included everybody.
Everybody, okay.
Yeah.
We included all.
And just since we're comparing notes on institutions, so Davis with PACT was using graduate students.
Yeah.
We never did that at San Jose State. We were more likely to hire our methods faculty for single subject scoring.
Yep.
And those methods faculty would have been both tenured and non-tenured. There'd be a pool of people.
Making sure that they all completed some type of training or calibration process. So
Okay, so even if I'm not scoring, because I think that's helpful, because it seems like right now in ours, I don't do any scoring at all for EdTPA, and I don't know if we had graduate students score our EdTPAs, I'd be any closer to any of this. It still seems like it'd just be offloaded, and I think that doesn't capture the spirit of what we're after here with that. So it seems like as long as the trainings are involved, then I think it gets people a little bit closer to.
Well, I did want to also just point out, because I think Beverly, you had mentioned in the previous recommendation round, this, what exactly might be meant by programs score their own candidates. In this case, I wonder if that has to be as exhaustive as score every single TPA versus score a sample of TPAs for calibration and program improvement. So it's interesting that we laid this out as kind of a blanket, like local scoring, but it seems to me you could have a two-tiered system. You could have an operator who provides generally all your scoring, but you could also require that local institutions for a portion on a, let's call it auditing sample basis, once a year, even once every other year. I just don't know that we have to be lockstep into an either or. Either a vendor like Pearson scores it or your local campus scores it versus a blended system. I wanted to put that out there for discussion. I didn't know what people thought about that.
Well, Brett, it's been a while since I looked at this standard, but I kind of think what you're describing is what's currently in place.
Well,
About,
maybe that's my failing is that, and I don't speak for San Jose State's teacher prep program, nor do I speak for the coordinator who is nominally in charge of all this. So I don't know if they've updated this work. My sense is, though, I could be wrong, that faculty who administer the TPA and administer who prepare candidates to be ready for TPEs have nominal experience, and as they come on boarding have even less experience with any routines that you're saying, hey, that's kind of how it's going now. I don't see those routines really in place. This could be just very unique to my campus, and it could be me misunderstanding what my campus does. I bet if you surveyed 23 CSUs and you asked them how much are people actually doing any kind of local scoring or faculty, whether they are lecturers or tenure track, in that case, you'd find a very small pool.
Well-
We are, I
I
actually
know
asked,
Stanford's the opposite of that usually,
no,
but
no, I asked last week or last meeting, how many are doing local scoring, and the answer was 0.
at Stanford, which
Anywhere,
always had.
No.
anywhere.
but
Oh,
let me
you guys
let me
do.
make a
I
slight distinction.
asked Adam or one of the other
You
people,
did, I remember that.
Okay,
yeah, and he said 0. No one is doing
No
any local
institution is
scoring.
doing it, yeah, with the
But
exception.
let me make a distinction, Brett. I didn't say that's what's happening now. I said that may be what the standards are calling for now, which might be different of how it's being implemented, which gets to sort of my group's recommendation of the last session about standards need to be evaluated in terms of are they being enforced and implemented the way they're written, or do they need revision? Because I think the standards right now reflect what you're talking about local scoring. I'm just not sure that programs are actually doing that.
And I can tell you our program does not, and I asked our faculty, and specifically our faculty stated they do not want to undergo any type of training to assess TPAs or to actually assess TPAs without compensation.
Yeah, it's work.
Compensation is the critical
That
piece.
key piece. So
Yep.
they're willing to do it if they were
Mhm.
compensated for it.
Well,
But-
and it's interesting
So
because
where's
the
that
test-
compensation going to come from?
somebody's compensating them. People who are doing the scoring are getting compensated, except for
Through
FAS,
Pearson,
but
though.
NTPA and Cal TPA scorers are compensated. It's
Through
just a
Pearson.
matter of
Yeah, but that
Who's
doesn't
doing it?
happen locally. So
Well,
Pearson, not
no, it
locally.
does. Whoever's scoring those is getting paid for it, and whether it's local or not. I mean, scorers are not volunteers.
Right, because the scores, because I was a scorer once, so scores apply to be a scorer. You're compensated through Pearson. With a local
Yeah.
score, Pearson will not compensate you if you're a local scorer.
so I just look at the recommendation here under recommendation 1. It says the recommendation is necessary because decontextualized and centralized scoring allows programs to not engage with the quality of their candidate submissions. I think that rationale speaks to the gap, and the gap that Collins and others have just mentioned is whatever the standard says currently, for many reasons, it's not occurring.
Yeah.
So how could this recommendation push it to occur? And I think right now, as this stands, it's pretty strong in terms of clarity of purpose, certainly rationale. I don't know if we could say more, except going back to this idea of programs score their own candidates. I think it's a little blanketed. I'm a little worried that it has to be either or. So
Their own score, at least a subset.
a subset, yeah, I think we should sort of offer a possibility of you could still rely on it.
Do we want to say a percentage, a specific?
Yeah, just a percentage or subset.
Well, I was wondering if we wanted to give.
Yeah, I don't think we want. That's actually comes back to later on in spring, I think, Beverly, when we talk about validity and validating the actual terms of the instrument.
But
The
we're also
subset-
gonna have a whole recommendation for, is all around local scoring.
Exactly.
So we'll get. into a
Exactly, we'll
lot of
get there.
that.
So why don't we leave it open for now? That's like this.
Yeah, I'm looking at NTPA at their score requirements. They pay their scorers $25 an hour. It doesn't say anything that you can't score in your local program or anything like that. It just talks about qualifications. I think whoever does scoring gets paid for it. But I agree. I mean, the whole thing of how to get programs to use more of
It's
their
very
local
unclear, because like I said, I went through that process and I was specifically told if you are a local scorer, your institution is responsible for compensating you for scoring. Pearson will not do it if you are not listed as a, that's what I was
Right.
told.
If it's
Yeah, I
done
just think
in
that's
a
not-
local scoring situation, as opposed to you becoming a pool of the scorers who score any.
Right. Yeah.
I think the financing issue is important because we always say these are intersecting, right? Policy has to be connected to finance, but I do want to just say, I don't think that finance is the only problem. The problem is, can you say programs score their own TPAs, meaning as a blanket statement, everybody who's a provider must score locally? Do we? When
How do you
score
define
their own
local?
tenants,
How do you define local?
at the site level, program site level.
So they have to be an employee of that institution?
We're asking.
I think that's what we're asking about. Yeah, I think that was the initial thing about back in the day, it was always happening at the local site level. Now it's moved on to a third party. The question is, can we mandate or state as a policy recommendation that it go local? So what does it mean? Why do we have this program score their own candidates? Doesn't that imply by definition, you have to have a local relationship? A Pearson pool of scores coming from somewhere in California scoring me up in San Jose is not my own program. That's a pool of scores.
Right.
So this is deeply implying,
Do
maybe
we
it's,
want to define programs more specifically? So that recommends that people affiliated with preparation programs, including teacher education, faculty. I mean,
in other words, define.
that's just a question.
Yeah. I mean,
I have a
probably-
question. There's an assumption here that scoring leads to better understanding the assessment or better being able to provide support for candidates in passing the assessment. And so I'm just sort of questioning this assumption that local scoring is an answer to the question. I think that is, I'm not saying that we shouldn't locally score. I've done it both ways. But I think if the purpose is for programs to better understand the assessment and be able to embed the ideas of the assessment into the program, I wonder if local scoring has to be mandated in order for that to happen. And I'm also wondering about and making sure that we're attending to the various different kinds of programs. So, for example, we don't have graduate students. And yet I have 550 candidates. That looks very different than a program that might have 50 candidates and lots of graduate students. And so I do think that we need to make sure to attend to the resource structures that different programs will have in their ability to do this. But I also am wondering, are we agreeing with that assumption that this has to happen in order for programs to really understand the test or assessment to be able to embed it? And pass rates are really high already, and we're not doing local scoring. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, is this a high leverage recommendation? Like, should we be pushing for this?
So I can't speak to the impact of scoring teaching performance assessments.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've read research about writing teachers participating in scoring of writing assessments and how it serves as a really powerful professional development model for helping them to understand what the tasks are that are required of students, to see the range of submissions. And so I think we can take from that and apply it in this context.
I would echo that, Sean. I think you make a really good point about, is it high leverage for the problem we're trying to solve? Having said that, I don't think it's an assumption. I would agree with Juliet that there's evidence for writing, and there's also evidence for in general portfolio assessment. So Linda Darden-Hammond, who certainly had her hand on some vision of what this TPA might be versus a bubble and test, argued often and continuously that embedding the actual experience of an assessment at a local level encourages conversations that might not have happened. But that begs the question, even if that was true for a group of high schools or for a group of writing teachers, is that true for teacher educators? I don't think we have a lot of research on that. I don't think we know. So it is an assumption insofar as it's just about teacher education.
So, Shane, can I just ask, when you used to score at Stanford as a graduate student, it wasn't because you were a graduate student that you were scoring, was it? It was because you were a supervisor.
Yeah.
And you were going in to see students teach, and it made that work more clear for you as an advisor
board, Pat.
Didn't it?
I never supervised.
I absolutely believe that engaging in scoring allowed for me and it allows for other folks to be able to integrate that work, across the different aspects of the support for candidates. So I think it's largely beneficial. I think what I'm wondering is if we're not local scoring, but the pass rates are high, whether or not this is actually a problem. I think that's what it is. I think it's beneficial. I'm not saying that we shouldn't do it.
And
I think it's helpful.
Yes, I
And it-
agree with you. And the more I read this, the more I'm thinking, okay, so as it's stated, we recommend that programs score their own candidates TPA. That's
Mhm.
already an option. So making a recommendation for something that already exists doesn't make sense. But the question is, I mean, and I agree, I believe local scoring is important, is effective, and can be useful.
Mhm.
I think we need to ask a question, why isn't it already being done?
Well,
That's a resource point.
why isn't it already being done? And then Shayna, you said the pass rates are already high. I think across the board, pass rates are high, but in some institutions, they are not high.
Exactly.
And so
Mhm.
that's what we
Mhm.
want those institutions to engage more with the assessments themselves.
So we're gonna punish everyone.
Yes, I know.
So this is back to sort of the question around the diversity of programs. And the reason I brought up grad students, not because, like for me, when I was a graduate student, I did engage, and it wasn't because I was a graduate student, it was because I was doing work in the program. But the graduate student pool there was a pool of people to draw from that in some institutions you don't even have that pool. It's hard enough to get supervisors sometimes for over 500 candidates every year. So I'm just thinking about, like, to the point about resources, the differentiation or the differences in resource availability program by program and what that might mean if every one of these has to be locally scored. So I think that also sort of, comments on the earlier or supports the earlier comment about maybe like a subset or have some sort of other engagement with the
Instead of a
test.
subset, this kind of sounds like a punishment too, though, but what if we had some an expectation or recommendation that the local scoring has to happen for the retakes that would help faculty or program affiliated faculty be better connected with the candidates in their
That
care.
would help a more
That's an
formative
interesting
approach as well.
Remediation.
But I don't know if it comes across as punishment, saying if they don't pass the first time, then it's on you to figure it out. I don't know. I don't want to make it seem like that or sound like
I
that,
think
but
that would also address some of the other focus areas as far as costs, not necessarily having them pay to resubmit if you do a local scoring. You just have them, I like that.
Connects this morning's discussion.
I don't know whether I'm right. I'm usually wrong, right? So I can accept being wrong again, but I think that this is involved, and this was one of the things they wanted us to talk about in this working group, not because of local scoring, but because of having a local TPA. So that we weren't using Pearson, it was actually to try to control the whole process rather than the aim of this is local scoring and then we'll all be fine, right? It's really trying to, I think that this came about because of people at the commission that wanted to see Pearson and Cal TPA go away as a structure.
By the way,
I'm
education.
thinking that our discussion of this might be informed by, I was just looking for what do the current standards say about local scoring. And it says all approved models must include a local scoring option in which the assessors of candidate responses are California program faculty and or other individuals identified by the program who meet the selection criteria. Local assessors are trained and calibrated by the model sponsor. Scoring work is facilitated and their scoring results are facilitated and reviewed by the model sponsor. Detailed plan for establishing and maintaining score accuracy, inter-rater reliability. I'm looking for more about. The sponsor must provide an annual audit process that documents that local scoring outcomes are consistent, reliable with the model for candidates across the range of programs using local scoring, and informs the commission where inconsistencies in local scoring outcomes are identified. If inconsistencies are identified, The sponsor must provide a plan to the CTC on how it will address the scoring inconsistencies for both the current scoring and future scoring.
Beverly,
So-
does it say anything, does it define local scoring there?
No, it just says by California, a local scoring option in which the assessors are California program faculty and/or other individuals identified by the program who meet the selection criteria. Local California assessors is how they define it.
California, not local site.
Yeah, so is that performance assessment design standards? Where do you
Yes,
speak from? Okay.
and it is in, wait a minute, it's in standard 2.
Yeah, so they're defining local as California.
California.
Well, no, they're defining
No.
local. I mean, it would have to be. But what they're really defining it as is the institution itself
Yeah.
is responsible. That's what they mean by local. That the institution is
That's not how
responsible.
it's stated.
So it could be, someone that I know who's in Fresno scoring for me and they're going to be one of our scorers.
Well, and it also
use
says,
them because they're
also
in
says-
California, but we've chosen them. The program has chosen and organized and interviewed them, and then they pass them on to be trained by.
So
That's
should
how I
we,
read
so
it.
are
but the
we,
mandate
that
in the
is
standard, the mandate in the standard is not for the program. It says the program sponsor must provide this as an option. So that means that Pearson and CalTPA have to have this option. So if a program doesn't want all their scoring to
program
go somewhere
sponsor-
else, but it doesn't say that
It's-
the institution.
Sorry,
has-
Beverly, can you clarify?
Excuse me,
It's
Colin.
the
It
program
doesn't say the
sponsor.
institution, please. It doesn't say that the institution has to elect to use local scorers. It just says that the sponsor has to provide that option. So maybe what we're getting at, the change in the standard, is that the institutions have to the extent possible, utilize this option of local program scoring.
Can I put a pause on something for a second? So I'm looking at the brainstorm scoring on page 10, which I guess is what fed into our recommendations. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay, and we have 3 recommendations and we have to come up with any changes in language. Between now and whenever our
45 minutes.
Okay, 45 minutes. So we have time. So we're kind of talking generally right now, and I think we're focused on recommendation 1, and we're clarifying what it means to say score your own candidates. So that's fair. I am looking at the brainstorming scoring guide on the statements that were made, maybe to generate that first recommendation. And it does say really clearly here, Beverly, performance assessment models include an element of local scoring. In other words, yes, Pearson or any other provider has to include an element of local scoring in its TPA delivery,
And then right under that, require programs to engage in local scoring.
which is different, right? So
Yeah,
it's good to
because-
clarify the two. Okay.
Because the program sponsor are just the 3 agencies that created the assessment. It's the institution that's not mandated here in any way.
Right. So when you say performance assessment models, you're using the word sponsor. I think that's what's meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what the standard uses. They're just talking about Pearson and Fresno and the state, CalTPA, that in the scoring options, they have to offer that local option. Then the program, the IHE or whoever, can elect or not elect to use that option. They can have all their scoring done by Pearson, or they can use that option that says we want to do some or all of it. So the piece that it seems to me is missing is we want all institutions to elect, at least to some extent, that local scoring option that is offered by the sponsors. Remember, the sponsors are not the credential preparers. They're just the big institutions that created the test.
By the way, just to clarify, maybe it's my own misconception, but I thought that Pearson, or this has another name now. It's called Education Evaluation Systems. When we say CalTPA is scored by somebody other than Pearson, I thought CalTPA is actually organized and scored with the help of evaluation systems.
Yeah,
That's
the state contracted with them.
Yeah,
Two
that's
of-
Pearson. So just, I don't think we should be like, so we have 2 Pearson models that are
Right.
being scored, and we have 1 FAST, which is
Right.
a different program sponsor model.
That's
So
right.
the question
Which is
for
what we-
implications would be, can Pearson reorganize through this recommendation its already in statute or already in contract requirement that it allow for local scoring or a portion of local scoring at the request of whom? at the request of the site that's using it. So if San Jose State says, we want that local scoring option exercised in our relationship to CTC Pearson, they have to then say, yes, we can do that, and we can
No, I
train
don't think
for
so.
scores.
I don't think so. The standard already says that Pearson has to allow this.
It probably is part of
The
the
mandate
contract.
now is on the program, San Jose State, to say, we want to exercise this option that's being given to us. And see,
That's what I
programs
think I just tried
haven't
to
done
say.
it.
Thank you
They
for
have-
saying it more clearly. So that would mean that, again, in the case of CSU, there'd be those who are taking the Cal TPA, they would have to be informed through this policy that they have now a right to exercise an option that was always there, but they never exercised.
Well, they may know that they have this option, but they've elected not to for what you said earlier about faculty just don't want to do this. They feel overworked already, and even if they're paid this $25 an hour, they just don't want to take on scoring at TPAs or Cal TPAs. And so
Okay,
a program by default uses the program sponsor to score,
pool of
just
program
they don't
sponsors.
have people locally who will do it.
Right. Okay.
So are we
Where are we with that?
Well,
eliminating this recommendation?
that sort of raises questions. Because this was much more reaching. this
Is there a compromise recommendation that says that we'd like the commission to explore how to encourage programs to exercise to the extent possible the local scoring options that already exist? And you know,
I think that's part of what we were trying to get at with this second bullet.
Mhm.
Be done to identify barriers and necessary resources to enable programs to score their own candidates TPAs.
Mhm.
right.
So
'Cause
our
the first
recommendation is that this
implementation-
happened, but we recognize that there are issues with it, and so we need to identify those barriers and then find the resources to break down those barriers.
Yeah, and I think the first one where we say we recommend that programs score at least a subset of their own things, I mean, that's not really a recommendation. That's more like we recognize that there's value to programs scoring at least a subset. And, you know, to facilitate that happening to a greater extent, we work to identify barriers and resources and so on. Because that first part isn't really a recommendation. That's,
Well, could it be a requirement? Programs be required to score at least a subset?
no, I don't think we can require that. If they can't do it, they can't, you know. But I think if we say that, you know, in recognition of the value of, you know, both to programs and to candidates of local scoring, that we want to encourage isn't the right word, but we want to facilitate this happening to a greater extent. And so our recommendation is we identify the barriers or the resources and explore ways to incentivize programs to greater use local scoring. I mean, something. Because that first thing isn't really a recommendation. It's more like the rationale of why we want them to local score. That we recognize it's valuable, it has benefits.
Doing great, Adam.
40 minutes?
We have 40 minutes, right? Don't we have till 1:50?
1:15.
1:15.
Yeah, loose.
We might need some more time. We're on one of three. But part of that was I heard 1:50.
That's what I thought.
Sorry,
Can we go to,
1:30.
can you do 1:30?
1:30. Sure.
1:30.
Thanks, Adam.
Okay,
So can we?
so do we want to
Clarify the other ones before we
Yeah,
come back?
maybe we need to
Yeah.
let this sit a little bit.
strike through?
I'm not seeing a major issue if we literally change the first bullet to say we recommend that programs score a subset of their own category as TPAs. I just like, the rest seems fine to me. You're not overreaching, you're simply recommending a subset be looked at. But if it's all about program providers who do the scoring, then that doesn't make any sense. Maybe it works together. I think the harder stuff is in recommendation 2 and 3, to be honest, especially 3.
Why don't we ask the
the program sponsors to do the work. They should be the ones holding the trainings.
The program sponsors
Yeah.
to identify the barriers and resources. Wait,
Well, no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the.
What are you looking at? Which recommendation?
Oh.
The third bullet, I guess.
in ongoing program sponsored. Statewide, program model sponsored. Or TPA model sponsored.
Sorry, we can move on. Let's move on. We don't need to.
Could I just make a small edit to the first bullet under this recommendation is necessary because? Could we change the tone of that to make, it sounds as if programs are trying not to engage. Instead of saying it allows programs not to engage, can we say it prevents them from engaging?
That's a pretty strong statement.
Well, it's just a return. Well, it maybe not prevents then, it reduces the quality of engagement. I was just objecting to what it says it allows programs not to engage. It kind of sounded like programs are looking for ways
Reduces
not
the opportunity to
Programs.
engage.
ability.
Yeah.
How about reduces the opportunity rather than not engage, just reduces the
Or what
opportunity
about-
to engage.
Or I just said reduces the program's ability to engage.
Yeah.
No, okay, what did you want?
I just thought opportunities. We don't know about abilities really. I mean,
There you go.
seems it's open.
You could flip
To
the
the
statement,
allows.
make it positive. Local scoring increases opportunities to engage with the quality
Okay.
of candidate
That's
submission.
better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thus deficit, Cheyenne.
Yeah,
Why not?
thank you.
Better. Okay, so have we resolved the first bullet though on that
No, we
program
haven't.
score their own?
But we decided we'd move on because we haven't addressed 2 or 3.
Okay,
I left this dead as the strike through just to try and
good.
highlight that we are grappling with that.
Still in process.
So number 2, programs use the data from the TPA to engage in programmatic continuous improvement, including curriculum review for alignment with TPA cycles and tasks. This feels a lot like what we discussed yesterday.
This isn't already included somewhere?
I think this is already in the assessment standards.
It's not in the assessment standards, it's in the common standard, but the common standard doesn't specifically state that they have to use TPA data. It's somewhat in program standard 5, but again, it doesn't ask that they actually use the data to engage in continuous improvement. It states, and I can only say this because I was in the continuous improvement group yesterday. It states that it's like they have to have the data and be aware of the data, but they don't have to do anything with the data.
Yeah, and that's what we altered yesterday,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
exactly.
And we added in that they need to have a plan to address.
They have to
Efficiencies
look at
as well.
disaggregated data and then you, based on that, create a plan for,
Yes. For improvement.
yeah. So I don't know if we want to spend a lot of time on it because
No, I think it's okay. That
you
one.
like it is, okay, even better.
I mean, I'm one of many, so I don't know.
So I,
That's a consensus.
as a person who has a curriculum and is taught inside of a program that utilizes alignment strategies based on BTC standards, but also based on good practice for what I teach in the research that relates to what I teach. When you say curriculum review, I would be alarmed to hear that there's going to be a curriculum review committee set up by my local chair of my department or the program coordinator that says in all courses, there must be alignment, meaning every foundations course, methods course, practicum, or in the ones that are most closely aligned with the TPA, which might be the seminar practicum, but not my methods class, not my foundations class. So the way our program's organized, we have 3 different ways of teaching and they're not the same. So when you say curriculum review, what do you mean?
Could it be program reviews? of the curriculum?
Including programmatic practices.
Maybe academic program alignment.
That's broader. It takes that pressure off of reviewing my curriculum and having a committee do me and for me. Which brings up all sorts of questions about academic freedom in places that are universities versus necessarily other programs, which may not have the same principles or values. I don't know what county offices think about. I know what universities think about. And that word is a little scary, curriculum review. it's happening. People are trying it in other spaces, but do we take it out or are we gonna just talk about it?
So I changed it to say
Keep it if
including
you want.
alignment of academic program so that it,
Okay,
based on the feedback that I was hearing. Oh, sorry.
I think in the second sentence, reducing the process. Because we're not reducing workload, we're reducing process.
I'll do that, Juliet, so you can record. I'll be the Zoom person.
I can
We
happily.
can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Yes. Are we okay to move on to recommendation 3?
Is it about to kick you guys?
Yep.
Okay.
In seconds.
Okay.
Hi, guys. It just came back.
Not that fast,
Hold
but I'll.
on for a minute. It dropped off.
Yeah, the breakout rooms are on a timer, and so that's what's going on. We're hoping they were able to catch it. It might happen again. But are we okay to move on to recommendation 3? And then I can show them where the setting is.
is it on their side?
Can you all hear?
I can hear you. Now we're missing.
Beverly.
Mm-hmm.
Move on to recommendation.
Put it out there so we can at least look at it.
You'll have like 10 minutes. Yep. And this feels like what we discussed this morning.
Yes. Keep pointing in that direction.
Scaffolded sequence feedback on their work throughout the process prior to submission. Current guidelines for public support and then revised to ensure entire process be formative and educative. Like that language. You say something.
What do you provide for like the limits of feedback? Because that's what I mean.
So we don't do great feedback. In fact, I was thinking about that. We just give the rigor scores. Yeah, it's not good.
No.
Oh, in terms of ahead, like in the process?
Within the process before they actually submit
It's
to you.
interesting that you say that because we have done very minimal feedback. There was this narrative around the process for a very long time that no feedback could be provided.
Absolutely.
And so none was provided. And so it's in fact, I've done a lot of in the last semester. Hey, everybody, I'm participating in this work group. Really, we can give some feedback.
Yeah.
So anyway,
So that's one of my biggest issues.
yeah.
Is the document, I imagine, yeah, it's very similar to the Pearson one. It basically makes anybody who says anything to a student about their work
Yeah.
feel guilty that they're cheating in some way.
Right. And I'd be a big advocate for providing candidates with models, just because that's what we
Models
do
for
in
what?
writing instruction.
Oh, we do that.
So we've been told, again, this could be part of, I think this is part of the narrative, that we could never provide candidates with models.
You mean models of responses,
Like a model, like a completed
Yeah.
submission.
Yeah, submission.
exemplars they're called in the.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
LTPA provides mid-range submissions,
Oh, my God.
so they do have models that they can use, yeah. And Cal APA does that as well.
Not exemplars if they're mid-range, so
Yeah.
an exemplar would be.
Well, and it's exemplar of a mid.
No, it's exemplar, not exemplary.
Exactly. You can have exemplars at any
They are
point. in your life.
exemplars.
This is a
not
one, this is a
exemplary.
two.
Quality exam.
We
no,
only
of
provide the
mid-range.
passing ones,
Yeah.
so that way folks can see what passes.
I think this is one of the most important things.
Yeah.
That will help us address the disproportionality of some students.
Uh-huh.
Because if we can reword this so that there is more support that we can give, that doesn't impinge on a scorer's ability to know what this student is teaching. So for example, a good example is the video. At the moment, we are told quite clearly that you can't advise a student as to which clip to submit. Now, I would argue, if you've got all these clips, why not sit down with a student and say, well, this is really good in this clip, this is really good in this clip, and have a look at those, because that's their teaching, right? I mean, whether I tell them to choose the clip or they choose the clip, even if I was totally directive and said, this is your 10 minutes, right? It is their 10 minutes. What I'm doing is making a choice for them about what 10 minutes, or at least having a conversation with them about what 10 minutes they're going to choose.
Yeah.
Rather than them put it all together and we go, Jesus, why didn't you choose
That
that?
10 minutes. Yeah.
Why did you choose that 10 minutes when
Yeah.
you've got 3 kids doing all sorts of crap in the back and you haven't even talked about it?
Right, right.
Right? You know what I mean? And it's, so, but at the minute, our guidance, and I imagine Cal TPA is similar, is that isn't part of what you should be doing.
At what point are they making the decisions about their best work?
Well, that's what I'm saying, are we testing them on their ability to make decisions about their best work, or are we testing them as teachers in the classroom?
Testing their ability to say, I demonstrated this. Right? Because if they're supposed to be submitting a video clip of them teaching something specific, they say, well, this is when I did this. And then they annotate that video or provide commentary to that video to say, this is what I did and this is why.
This is someone who is just starting to teach, and they're supposed to be able to choose. I mean, they could have an hour that is of amazing teaching, but some of it doesn't address a particular prompt that's necessary. So what we're judging them by is their ability, not their ability to teach for an hour of a great lesson, but their ability to choose a snippet that addresses the prompts that they've been given.
An hour of great teaching, you'll be able to find 10 minutes that address a prompt.
But no, that's what I'm saying is I think that some candidates find that difficult to do.
Right.
But the teaching is there. They're just making a mistake over what they choose. I think this is really important.
The only concern I have is what if you get a faculty member, and I'm not saying it's you, what if you get a faculty member that advises a candidate poorly and they don't pass? Now what do they say? My faculty told me to turn this in. Now I failed. Who's going to pay for
No,
my
because at the end of the day, I don't think, I mean, I know what you're saying, is it's their work, it's their decision. And the way around it is to say, okay, here's a couple of clips that I think that you should be looking at. Out of the hour that I've seen that of you teaching, here's a couple of clips, choose which one you think, because then the responsibility is back to them. But at the minute, we can't even really have that discussion, it feels like.
Watch a video with them and say, where do you think you demonstrated this well?
Yeah.
Well, I think I demonstrated it well right here. Well, I don't know. Let's talk about.
That's fine. That's exactly what I'm saying. People won't do that at the moment.
But if you say, here's 10 minutes, you turn this in.
Yeah.
That's a whole.
I was speaking, but that's what I'm talking about is at the minute, they're not doing that.
Yeah, and you know, that's just the concern.
I think we're at a consensus that we're now done and ready to present to the group. Is that true for our audience and friends in Cyberland?
Sounds good, but just going back to
Beverly?
recommendation one, are
Yeah.
we just gonna eliminate, are we just?
Do we
that
leave-
First bullet or
Are we gonna cross, delete it?
editing, or deleting?
Am I gonna leave it as strike through?
I still think asking them to score the retake.
Subset, I think. Retakes, that was
A
nice.
subset
yeah.
of the retakes. That encompass everything?
There was language, I think, in one of the, I don't know, the criteria or something, maybe Beverly, something that you read that said something like an element of local scoring. What was there was like a phrase and it just gave me pause and I was,
That was the first bullet point or the first score brainstorm scoring area. 1.45 was performance assessment models include an element of local scoring.
an element of, and that I'm wondering, like they could take a variety of different forms and maybe that's a good thing. Like maybe it leaves it really open for programs to be able to have to engage in some form of local scoring, but there's an element of it. I don't know what that could look like, but anyway, that language seemed kind of nice.
I mean, Matt, you're suggesting a fairly directive, again, this is like we were talking about high leverage. What's going to make a difference? Well, we don't really need to do it across the board, but we should really look at those resubmissions, make sense of them as a faculty or as a program provider. So I'm okay with that because I think that's where the work can be done productively, but it
That's
also
not
ignores.
scoring, is it? I mean, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think the language was element, although I like that language. I think it was that they had to include an option for local scoring.
That's already there, though.
Yeah,
That's
right,
what you already showed us.
That's where
It's
we're on.
already there, so we don't need to say that, do we?
right. Yeah, I'm just saying, I don't think element was in there before. I don't think that was the word, but it's a good
Well,
word.
it's not in the recommendation, it's in the brainstorming.
Right.
I can just bring everybody back to what's on the actual document, which is programs score their candidates, TPAs, resubmission. That's what we're currently, I think, discussing to either remove, amend, or adapt. So what do people want to do with that statement? It's bullet point number 1.
We got 1 minute.
Yeah, 1 minute. I'm taking Matt's get it done approach. Right. So what do y'all
I
think?
always want to do this. Keep this one focused on this piece. And then have this separate one be about,
Sure. I just want to make that 4.
I don't know.
Or just 1A would be.
And then do we have one more done?
Let's do it, see what happens.
I think it goes away. I don't know for sure.
It's off the screen. But there's always Appleseed.
I guess we got no choice.
Is that where we are?
Where we are now.
Okay.
Time is the decider.
We didn't get that slam dunk.
We started.